I'm going to make a billet with a mosaic pattern in it. The billet's going to consist of 2 separate billets for now. I intend to 4-way it and twist it later on, but for now, this one here is 19 layers, this one here is 13 layers. This will remain straight layers. This is going to be 19 layers of crushed W's. I do it like this because I don't like singeing all the hair off my arm. Keep my billets within this size so that my initial compaction weld that actually sets the pieces together touches the entire billet. I have done it in the past where I've had them the other way and had to do the first press in a couple of sections, and I found that when you hit one end, you're creating some stress in that piece, and the other end has a tendency to want to lift up, and that is something I don't want. So this way, I get even pressure on the whole thing. Right now, I'm just heating the billet up slowly because I don't want the thin welds that I've done. I've just fused them together with a TIG welder, the sides, just to make it airtight. I don't want those sides to crack or split and allow oxygen into the billet, and that could happen if I throw it into a hot forge. And as you can see, that billet hasn't even been in there for 10 minutes, and it's already well on its way to glowing. That's good. Second press coming up. After this, I'm going to turn my dies back to the way they normally go. That's all that takes. We'll do one more press, and then I'm going to put my angle dies in, my 45s. The first 2 initial presses, my weld should be set. Now we're going to start the crushed W's. The sides down into the middle, and since they are stacked in such a way so that it's going to be light, dark, it's going to make a U on both ends. So when you draw that billet out and you cut it in 3 sections and you stack those sections again, those U's then turn into W's. Okay, so we're going to do one more press like this and then make a change. to get the W's, which is going to flatten the bar out now with the U's going sideways. Of a bite, because that increases your risk of delaminations. A little bit at a time is the best way to do it. so here's my billet. So far it looks good. I'm encouraged, so I'm going to cut the ends off because the ends are always scrap. There's always scrap when you do Damascus. Piece is never as big when you're finished as when you're started. The ends is where the biggest amount of stress shows, and you're going to get overlaps, a little bit of milled scale in there, and they normally come off. So we're going to cut here, here, and then we're going to check the steel, and hopefully we're not going to see any faults in there. Okay, so that's one end. Alrighty, I have my billet divided into 3 equal sections, and now we're going to cut it up. Three equal pieces. We'll clean up the ends and see what we got. Alright. My pieces are still hot, so I'm still wearing gloves. But we'll see. Quick dip in the ferric. That's ferric. And this is just water and baking soda to neutralize the acid. All right, so after a dip in the acid, and we stack to line up the lines, this is what we're left with. So far, I'm happy. And all I'm going to do is forge weld those 2 pieces, or those 3 pieces together. I'm just going to put it in the press and kiss it a couple of times lightly to get them all to join. And then I'm going to set it aside, and I'm going to work on the other billet, billet number 2. Okay, so that's billet number 2, and I have it drawn out now to about 9.5 inches. Should be long enough to do the next step. In this billet we have our crushed W's, and these are 2 straight layer billets, and they're going to sandwich this billet. So now I just have to put them together. Alright, so here is our prep. It is together. I just have to weld it shut now so that it is airtight. But here we're going to have crushed W's, a straight layer of 13 layers, and 13 layers here. And I have my pieces all welded up. There's 3 separate pieces here, a whole bunch of layers, but only 3 separate pieces. And I'm just letting it heat up gradually at the mouth of the forge, just so that I don't crack my forge, my TIG welds on the sides. Okay, now I'm going to change the angle of the lines on my billet. And to do that, all I'm going to do is turn it 45 degrees and crush it to almost a halfway point there. I want this thing as perfectly square as I can possibly get it. Because if all goes well and I've got decent forge welds and the pattern's where I want it, the next step is going to be to cut it up into 4 pieces, which means I need it longer. I need it longer, and those pieces are going to get stacked around each other instead of on top of each other, so they need to fit very, very well. Okay, now we have the billet drawn out, and it's squared off, and it is reasonably straight. So the next step is going to be to cut it up and do the 4-way. Alright, so my piece is now cut into 4. And I don't know if you can pick it up on a camera. I always find that it's hard to get a good shot of Damascus. But anyway, this is the layering that I'm going to be doing. And this is the way they're going to get joined. So I'm going to want to prep this side and this side. This side and this side. This side, this side, and then the 2 innards. That to that, to that, to that. And once they are all done and prepped, I'm going to square off those inside corners, because the next challenge is going to be to try and eliminate that little gap that's in the middle. If that would run, if that doesn't disappear and I get mill scale in there, this whole billet is ruined. But this is the mosaic pattern as it's going to be, and this is where my heart is usually in my throat when I do this weld, because if anything goes wrong, once you twist it, it's all the way through, and this is in the heart of the steel, so we don't want that. That initial forge weld, the initial press, has to eliminate any kind of gap that's in there. Okay, so we've drawn out that hunk of steel into this nice 1-inch diameter bar now. It's more or less round. I mean, the press isn't going to do a perfect job. I'm not going to put that kind of time into it. It's not necessary. I'm only taking the corners out because I'm going to twist this, and the corners are going to make great big ridges around here, which are going to be minimalized because it's round now. And my pattern is on the inside. And so far, I have clean steel. At this point, I have a dozen full revolutions twisted on one side of my billet. So now I've flipped it around, and we're going to twist the other side. Now, I have to remember to go in the opposite direction on this side. I've forgotten that little step before. My piece of steel is twisted. It's clean on each end. I've cut them off, and I have etched and checked. So I've drawn my bar out to roughly 1/2 inch by 1 inch, and I have cut it up like this, okay? I have some deeper fold-overs. I'm sure these are fold-overs and they will grind out, but there won't be as much material. So I will save these two pieces for a smaller knife. I'm going to take these two pieces because they are going to be the best two out of the whole lot. And this center piece I can cut again and make one more. So I'll get 3 knives out of that billet, with this two here being the best pattern out of the whole thing. This will be right in the center of each of my 2 halves. And here are my 2 pieces all welded up. In this is a 9-inch chef knife. Can't you see it? We're going to get this up to forge welding temperatures. And we're just going to crush this down with 2 compactions, both an 1/8 inch, and we're going to spread it over the entire billet so that it happens all at once. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do that like this. We'll put my dies in lengthwise, and I'm not going for a lot of pressure, so I'm going to be able to get away with this. These are measured blocks, all of them. That's 3/4 of an inch. We'll stack another one on top. Now we're at 1.5 inches. Now we are at 1 3/4 inches. And now we are at 1 7/8 inches. So, bringing this in, yes, indeed, 1/8 inch above this level. So that first initial compaction will spread all the way through, hopefully doing a forge weld right down that seam. Press number 2. Okay, so this is what we have from yesterday, and as you can see, my knife is shaped. Now this is oversized slightly because we always get fold-overs along the edges and where you're doing a lot of hammering, or at the ends, in this case going to be the tip and back in this area perhaps. But we'll see. Once I'm going to take the mill scale off now and we'll see what's on the bottom. But this is all so far just press and hammer work. I use the hammer for shaping, the press for drawing out. So now, let's just lock her down. All right, well, I'm very happy. After doing some grinding work for 45 minutes or so, I have clean steel, except for this one little, and that's just a little divot, like a pit. Okay, that's all that is. And that's going to come out when I put my bevel in for the blade. But there is a seam going right up the middle here, and there is no trace of it on the knife, so I got a perfect forge weld on top of the 332 that are in this block and in this block. So this is 664 layer total, and I'm happy with that. Decent shape, it's nice and straight, flat, and ready for the normalization process. We are starting the normalization process. This is about as low as I can have my forge. I've got it running on just like bare gas and bare oxygen feed. It's still going to produce probably 1800 degrees, so I have to be careful with how high I let this get up. But this is the beginning of that. So 1600 degrees, 1500 degrees, and then 1400 degrees before I quench. 2 hours. Soften it up a little bit. 400 degrees, 2 hour. Okay, I've been grinding on the knife. We're almost down to where I'm going to switch grits and start putting a finer grind on it, because we're getting thinner towards the bottom. And I'm very happy that there are no bad forged welds, no nothing. I have very clean steel on the inside, and this is 664 layers now. So 664 reasons, or 654 ways that I could have a problem. So, since it's a nice balmy -2 degrees outside today, I'm working with the door closed. We got our first snowfall. And right now, there is a small warp right here. There's where the bend is. And I'm going to take that out now. Okay, I'm trying to get this in focus here, and I need just the right angle. I think there you can tell that you can see the warp. This is going to be my straightening jig. It's nothing fancy. We do that, and we do that, and all that is a pinch point where I can change the pressure. So our warp is this way, so we want to push the sides that way. So we line up our little black mark here, and we're going to close it right there. And yeah, that is going to straighten it out, I can tell already. So this usually puts my heart in my throat a little bit. All right, I have everything I need set up, and here we go. First, we add some heat. Okay, that worked. I'm happy. As you can see, I have a perfectly straight chef knife. Beauty. Time to finish the edge. So, we're going to see what we've done. It's been in the ferric for a little over 2 hours now. Well, now I'm going to put it into the neutralizer right away. It'll just sit in there now for a couple of minutes and neutralize the acid and stop it working.